Hello, we're looking at 9 stories that connect inflation, energy costs, global trade, public health, medical privacy, courts, crypto, fuel policy, and weather risks. Hello, my name is Jared Urang, and welcome to the Spectrum for Thursday, May 14th. The goal here is not to chase the loudest headline. The goal is to ask what is confirmed, what is still unclear, and what gets lost in the spin, and how these stories show up in daily life. Let's get started. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Jared Urang with the 5 Diamond Group here at Vice Realty in Las Vegas, Nevada. And this is the Spectrum, where we cover the news that is relevant to us on an everyday basis and really focus on the human impact and how we can pay attention better. The reason for this segment and really for this entire series is because I've found many folks who have divided families or friendships based on different perspectives. And a lot of that is based on what they consume, what sort of news outlets. So the goal here is to be able to reach the focus of information and get to the core points and help us make better informed decisions as opposed to spin and talking points. So here is story 1. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that producer prices rose 1.4% in April. That is the largest monthly increase since March of 2022. Over the past 12 months, producer prices are up 6%. Services rose, goods rose, transportation and warehouse costs rose sharply. This is the business side of the this is the business side cost. This is the business cost side of the inflation story. Consumer prices already showed pressure. Now, producer prices show that businesses are facing higher costs before those costs reach the consumer. That matters because wholesale inflation often becomes tomorrow's higher shelf price, repair bill, a delivery fee, or a service charge. If you're hearing this from the market first coverage outlets, you might hear mostly about the Federal Reserve and interest rates. That matters. But it can miss the daily life concern. Higher business costs often land later in household bills. If you're hearing this from sources that are right of center, you might hear this framed mostly as proof of economic mismanagement. And that can underplay war, shipping, energy, transportation, and supply chain costs. If you're receiving this news story from, let's say, a left of center source, you might hear more about corporate margins and price setting. And that can underplay small businesses that face higher costs but do not have much pricing power. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the PPI final demand rose 1.4% in April and 6% year over year. April's monthly increase was the largest since March of 22, and the final demand services rose 1.2%, with final demand goods rising 2%. Transportation and warehouses services rose 5% according to the BLS release. What is not yet confirmed, though, is how much of the producer price increase will be passed on to consumers, whether April's increase reflects a short-term energy and war shock, or if this is a more durable inflation pressure. It's also not confirmed how the Federal Reserve will respond to the data, and finally, which consumer categories will feel the pressure next. So what is the human impact beyond the spin here? Well, the concern is that wholesale inflation can become tomorrow's higher shelf price, a repair bill, a delivery fee, or a rent-related service charge. A small business owner might have to choose between rising prices on loyal customers, cutting staff hours, delaying inventory, or taking home less money. A family might not see the producer price number directly, but they can feel it when the mechanic, the grocery store, or the landlord or even the contractor has to raise prices weeks later. The people least able to pass along higher costs are often the workers and small operators squeezed between suppliers and customers. So what can we do about this? Well, we can pay attention to whether made producer prices cool or stay hot. Watch how businesses talk and really about how they reflect their margins and pricing. The Fed, whether or not they will treat this as a temporary pressure, or will this be a reason to stay tighter for longer? If producer prices keep rising, consumer price relief becomes harder and rate cuts become less likely. If businesses absorb the increase, workers and small owners may feel pressure through hours, through hiring, or through take-home income. If this spike fades, households may avoid another wave of price increases, but confidence may take longer to recover. The practical question here is, where does a business cost become a family cost? If you run a business, if you drive for work, or if you're managing a household budget and you haven't seen any relief, please share your concerns in the comments here. And if you're joining me on the live chat, we'd love to hear your feedback. The White House has few tools for gas price relief as the Iran war drags on. Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration officials are working to manage the economic and political fallout from the Iran war. Hopes for a quick resolution are fading. The president has backed suspending the federal gasoline tax, and that would cut motor fuel prices by 18 cents per gallon. But prices are averaging more than $4.50 nationally. Reuters reports prices have risen about 50% since the conflict began, and more than 60% of Americans According to a survey, higher gas prices have hurt their household finances, and about 60% of Americans have dealt with this. The practical sequel to the Iran cost story is foreign policy decisions can create domestic costs faster than policymakers can offset them. A gas holiday tax may be visible, but it would be limited. It'd be temporary, and it does not solve the underlying war. It doesn't fill the supply. It doesn't increase refining or create solutions for a market problem. If you're catching this information on right-of-center sources, you may hear it framed as the administration seeking practical relief while prioritizing national security. And that can miss whether the public was prepared for the cost of the conflict. If you're receiving this from left-of-center sources, you might hear it framed as a political panic over gas prices. And that can miss the real hardship fuel spikes create for commuters, workers, and small businesses. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the White House officials are discussing consumer relief options as the Iran war raises economic pressure. Trump has endorsed suspending this federal gasoline tax, and the average gasoline prices are above $4.50. That's been 50% since the conflict began. What is not yet confirmed, though, is whether Congress will pass a gas tax holiday. Unclear how much of any tax cut would reach consumers rather than being absorbed elsewhere in the fuel chain. It's also unclear whether the Iran war will ease, expand, or continue pressuring energy markets. Finally, it's unclear as to what other relief tools the White House might consider. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that gas price relief debates happen often in Washington, where families feel the cost every time they start the car. A health home aide, a rideshare driver, a contractor, a parent with a long commute may lose a meaningful part of the week's income simply to filling the gas. And this is before any relief reaches at the pump. A family might cancel visits, delay repairs, skip errands, or put fuel spending on a credit card because transportation is not optional. The people with the least flexibility often pay first, while policymakers debate which limited tool is politically possible. So what can we do about this? Well, let's pay attention to whether the gas tax holiday becomes a real bill or simply stays a talking point. Watch whether oil prices and pump prices keep rising as the Iran war continues. We can pay attention to whether relief actually reaches consumers or gets diluted along the supply chain. If Congress passes a gas tax holiday, drivers might see short-term relief, but it might not fully offset the war-driven increase. If the war drags on, fuel costs may keep pressuring inflation in household budgets. If relief fails, or it just feels too small, public frustration might rise even among people who support the security goal. The practical question is this: what does relief mean if the underlying cause is still getting worse? How about you? Are you feeling the impact of fuel prices? Is it altering your commute, the work that you're doing, or maybe even your business costs? If you have something to share, please drop them in the comments, or you can join me during the live broadcast. Trump and Xi are weighing tariff cuts on $30 billion of non-sensitive goods. The United States and China are expected to move toward a managed trade mechanism during the Beijing summit. The proposal could involve each side identifying about $30 billion worth of goods where tariffs could be reduced. The idea is to focus on non-sensitive goods while leaving national security restrictions in place for sensitive technology. This is not a grand bargain. It's more like a pressure valve. The question is, what gets cheaper, what remains restricted, and whether this reduces risk or simply creates one control trade lane while the broader conflict continues. If you're hearing this from right-of-center sources, you may hear it framed as the tough managed trade that protects national security. And that can miss whether tariffs are still rising prices on ordinary goods. Whereas if you're hearing it from the left-of-center sources, you might hear it framed as ad hoc deal-making or trade uncertainty. And that could miss the bipartisan concern that some technologies create real national security risk. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the US and China are considering tariff cuts on roughly $30 billion of non-sensitive goods. And that approach would preserve controls on sensitive technologies while pursuing numerical trade targets in less strategic areas. The broader summit was meant to stabilize a relationship strained by tariffs and trade conflict. What is not yet confirmed, though, is that final agreement, whether or not it will be announced, if specific goods are covered by any tariff reduction or not confirmed. It's also unclear whether consumers will see lower prices or whether savings will remain with importers and firms. It's unclear whether China will make parallel concessions on rare earth, technology controls, or market access. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that a tariff deal can sound technical while affecting what businesses pay and families buy. A small retailer may not know whether to place orders, raise prices, or wait for tariff details that may not arrive in time. A family may feel the result later in appliance costs, school electronics, car repairs, or imported household goods. The people managing budgets are often left guessing while governments decide which goods are safe enough to trade more cheaply. So what can we do about it? Well, let's pay attention to whether the summit produces a written agreement or only a framework to work off of. Which goods are included, whether they matter to household budgets, and whether sensitive technology controls stay in place or they trigger some sort of retaliation. If the deal is narrow but real, it might lower costs in some categories without ending the broader trade conflict. If talks stall, businesses may keep pricing uncertainty into future orders. If tariff cuts are paired with stricter tech controls, consumers may see limited relief while strategic tension stays high. The practical question here is, who actually benefits when tariffs come down? Consumers or intermediaries? How about you? Have tariffs, imports, or supply delays affected you or your business or your household? If any of these have had create an impact positively or negatively, we'd love to hear your comments. Drop them in the comments below, or you can join me during the live chat and the live broadcast. The FDA chief's resignation has deepened leadership across the AHS. The Associated Press reports that Dr. Marty Makary resigned as head of the Food and Drug Administration, and that leaves the FDA with an acting commissioner. HHS already lacked a Senate-confirmed Surgeon General. The National Institute of Health director was also serving as acting head of the CDC. And the FDA lacked a permanent vaccine chief. This is not just a Washington personal story. FDA, CDC, NIH, and the Surgeon General's office shape drug approval. It impacts food safety. It authorizes vaccines and controls outbreak response. It crafts public health messaging and authorizes scientific credibility. Leadership gaps in all of these areas do not automatically mean agencies stop working, but they can slow decisions down. They can weaken public trust at the exact moment people need clear guidance. If you're catching this news from the right of center sources, you might hear it framed as an administrative turnover or replacing leaders who disappoint different fractions. And that can miss the public health question. Who's accountable when agency decisions affect millions? If you're catching this from left of center sources, you may hear it framed mainly as an institutional chaos. That can underplay the fact that large agencies continue operating through career staff and acting officials. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that Makary resigned as FDA commissioner according to the Associated Press, and several senior HHS-related roles were vacant already, or they were filled by acting leaders when he resigned. AP reports critics are raising concerns about upheaval and lack of scientific expertise in leadership. What is not yet confirmed, though, is who will be nominated or confirmed as the next FDA commissioner. It's unclear how long acting leadership will remain in place. It's also unclear whether vacancies will delay specific drug or vaccine, food safety, or public health decisions. It's also unclear whether public trust will recover or worsen. So what is the human impact beyond the spin in this case? Well, the concern here is that health agency instability can show up as slower guidance, less trust, more confusion when families need clear answers. A parent might delay a vaccine decision, or a patient might wait for treatment guidance. A local health official might struggle to explain federal recommendations if leadership keeps shifting. A food safety or outbreak response may depend on fast coordination across agencies already managing vacancies. The people most affected are often patients and families who do not follow agency org charts, but depend on the decisions those agencies make. So what can we do about it? Well, we can pay attention to who gets named as the FDA commissioner and who's nominated permanently. Watch the CDC, NIH, Surgeon General, vaccine, and FDA leadership appointments together, not separately. If credible leaders are installed quickly, agencies may regain stability and public confidence. If vacancies persist, health decisions may become easier to question and harder to communicate. If leadership battles overshadow science, the public might pay through confusion, delayed care, or weaker outbreak response. The practical question here is this: when a health agency speaks, does the public know who's responsible and why they should trust it? How about you? Does the federal health guidance, has it had an effect on your family? Are you a part of a clinic or a pharmacy or a school where this clarity has been most vague? Please, we'd love to hear your comments below, or join me on the live chat so we can speak directly on these matters. A judge blocked the Justice Department's demand for Rhode Island hospital transgender care records. The Justice Department has a federal judge has blocked the Justice Department from forcing Rhode Island Hospital to turn over records related to gender-affirming care for transgender minors. The hospital is operated by Brown Health. This subpoena sought broad records, including medical records involving medications such as puberty blockers. The judge said enforcing the subpoena would infringe on young patients' privacy rights. She also criticized the Justice Department's conduct as bad faith. This is a court fight. This is a court fight about medical privacy, federal power, state jurisdiction, and politically contested care. The public should separate the policy debate over gender-affirming care from the narrower question of whether the government can demand broad patient records from a hospital. If you're catching this story from the right of center, you might hear it framed as federal scrutiny of controversial medical treatment for minors. And that could miss the privacy and legal process question. That is, how broad can a government demand for patient records be? If you're catching this news story from the left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as an attack on transgender youth. And that can miss that courts are also deciding subpoena power, jurisdiction, and medical record privacy. So what is confirmed? We know that a federal judge blocked the Department of Justice demand for Rhode Island hospital records. The subpoena involved records related to gender-affirming care for transgender minors. The judge also cited privacy concerns and criticized the DOJ's conduct as bad faith. What's not yet confirmed is whether the Justice Department will appeal or narrow the subpoena. It's unclear how similar subpoenas to other providers will fare. It's also unclear whether hospitals will change care, record-keeping, or legal strategies in response. The ruling does not settle the broader national debate over gender-affirming care. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? Well, the concern here is that a federal subpoena can make private medical care feel exposed to families who already face fear and uncertainty. A parent might spend hours calling lawyers or hospitals to understand whether a hospital's child record could be handed over. A younger patient might delay care or avoid being honest with clinicians if they believe their records could become part of a political investigation. The people most affected are not cable news guests. They're families, clinicians, hospital staff trying to protect care and privacy, and still dealing with legal compliance at the same time. So will the Department of Justice appeal, or will they issue narrow subpoenas? Will other courts follow this or reject the reasoning? If this ruling stands, it might limit broad federal demands for patient records and strengthen privacy protections. If the Department of Justice wins on an appeal, hospitals may face more pressure to comply with wide-ranging investigations. If families lose trust in confidentiality, care may be delayed even where it remains legal. The practical question here is this: how much privacy should families expect when medical care becomes politically contested? How about you? Are you dealing with medical privacy issues or hospital compliance or affected by any of these cases? We would love to hear your comments or join us during the live broadcast. The Supreme Court's mifepristone pause reaches its Thursday deadline. The Supreme Court left current access to mifepristone in place until today. That temporary order allows patients to continue obtaining the pill at pharmacies or through the mail with an in-person doctor visit for now. It also temporarily blocks restrictions imposed by the Fifth Circuit from taking effect. The case stems from a Louisiana lawsuit challenging FDA rules on how mifepristone can be prescribed. The key point here is that this is not a final ruling. It's a deadline. Patients, pharmacies, and providers are waiting to see whether current access continues or whether mail access and telehealth visits are restricted while litigation continues. If you're hearing this from the right of center, you might hear it framed as FDA accountability, state authority, or abortion restriction. And that would miss the immediate impact to patient care question. The question being, what happens to someone with an appointment or a prescription today? If you're catching this from the left of center sources, you might hear it framed mainly as an attack on reproductive rights. And that can miss the procedural fact that this is an emergency access order, not a final merits ruling. So what do we know so far? What is confirmed? We know that current mifepristone access remains in place until today under the temporary order. Mail and pharmacy access remains available for now under that order. Lower court restrictions would suspend mail access and telehealth visits while the case plays out, if allowed to take effect. What is not yet confirmed, though, is whether the court will extend the pause, allow restrictions, or issue a narrow order. It's also unclear how quickly pharmacies and providers would update instructions if access changes. It's unclear how federal and state rules would interact after any new order. It's also unclear whether the court will address broader FDA authority now or later. So what is the human impact beyond the spin here? The concern is that legal uncertainty can turn medical care into a race against time. The patient may need to rearrange childcare, transportation, time off work, or a pharmacy pickup because access rules could change within hours. A provider or pharmacist may have to pause, verify, or reroute care while trying not to violate a moving legal standard. The people living the uncertainty pay in time, privacy, stress, and delayed care before the legal system reaches finality. So let's pay attention to what the court does today and whether mail, pharmacy, telehealth, or in-person visit rules change. If the court extends the pause, current access continues while the broader legal fight moves forward. Whereas if restrictions take place, patients may face more travel, fewer access points, and tighter scheduling pressure. If the court narrows the ruling, practical effects may vary by state and provider. The practical question here is, can people make medical decisions safely when the rules may change the same day? This is a new experience and a challenge that might increase down the road in other legal precedents. How about you? Does this affect your care or your clinic? Is there someone in your family who shares this uncertainty? We would love to hear what that sounds like in real life. You're welcome to share those in the comments. You can direct message me, or you can join me during the live chat. A Senate committee is weighing a long-awaited crypto market structure bill. Reuters reports that the Senate Banking Committee is set to consider the Clarity Act today. The bill would create a federal regulatory framework for cryptocurrency. It would also clarify which financial regulators oversee different digital assets. It would also help define when tokens are securities, commodities, or defined in another category. The bill includes a compromise over stablecoin rewards after its dispute between crypto companies and banks. This is a financial plumbing story with consumer consequences. Crypto regulation decides which agency oversees digital assets, which protections apply to investors, and how stablecoins compete with bank deposits, and how much risk moves outside of traditional banking rules. If you're hearing this from crypto-friendly sources, you may hear it framed as a long-awaited clarity and innovation. That can miss the consumer risk questions after years of fraud, collapses, and confusing products. If you're catching this from crypto-skeptical sources, you might hear it framed mainly as industry capture. And that can miss the real problem that unclear rules also leave consumers legitimately and legitimate firms in uncertainty. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the Senate Banking Committee is scheduled to consider crypto market structure legislation on May 14th. The bill is called the Clarity Act, and it aims to define regulators' jurisdiction over digital assets. Banks and crypto companies are disputing stablecoin related provisions. What's not yet confirmed, though, is whether the bill will advance to the committee. It's unclear what final language would survive the Senate and House, and it's also unclear whether the bill will reduce consumer risk or expand crypto adoption faster than oversight can keep up. It's also unclear how regulators would implement the framework. So what is the human impact beyond the spin? The concern here is that digital asset rules can decide whether ordinary people are protected before or after they lose money. A worker putting savings into a crypto app may not know whether a product is regulated, like a security, a commodity, or bank-like payment token, or something else. A family using stable coins for payments, though not often, might not understand whether the rewards, the reserves, or the platform failure can carry bank-like protections. The people most likely to suffer are consumers who hear the promise of innovation but miss the fine print of risk. So let's pay attention to whether the bill advances out of the committee, how it divides oversight between the SEC, CFTC, banking regulators, and other agencies. If the bill does make advancement with strong safeguards, digital assets might gain legitimacy without leaving consumers exposed. If it does advance with weak oversight, more risk could move outside of the banking system. If the bill stalls, regulatory uncertainty may continue and the enforcement fights might fill the gap. The practical question at the end of the day is, when financial products change faster than the rules, who carries the loss when things go wrong? The House passed a bill allowing year-round nationwide E15 gasoline sales. The House has passed a bill that would permanently allow a nationwide year-round sale of E15 fuel. This is gasoline that is blended with 15% ethanol. The bill passed a bipartisan vote of 218 to 203. Supporters say it gives consumers more fuel choices. It supports farmers and helps ethanol producers. Reuters notes the bill is a win for biofuel producers and farm groups, while raising concerns among refiners about higher compliance costs. This is a fuel policy story that lands in several places at once. It lands in gas stations, farm states, refiners, and drivers' budgets. If you're catching this update from the right of center sources or farm state sources, you might hear it framed as an American energy, rural economic support, and cheaper fuel option. And that can underplay environmental, vehicle compatibility, and refiner cost questions. If you're catching this from the left of center or environmental sources, you might hear it more concerned about ethanol policy and emissions. This can underplay the immediate affordability argument for drivers and the economic importance for farm communities. So what is confirmed? Well, we know that the House has passed a year-round E15 bill with a split decision between 218 to 203. The bill would allow year-round nationwide sales of E15 fuel, and it still requires Senate action before becoming law. What is not yet confirmed, though, is whether the Senate will pass the bill, how much prices would change for consumers, and how widely retailers would offer E15 year-round. It's also unclear how refiner compliance concerns would affect fuel makers. So what's the human impact? Beyond the spin here? Well, it's that fuel policy changes only matter to households if they produce real choices at the pump. A commuter might see an E15 sticker but still need to know whether the fuel is cheaper, if it's even available, or if it's appropriate for their vehicle. A farmer or an ethanol worker might see the bill as more stable demand during a period of agricultural pressure. A refiner or a fuel retailer might face compliance or infrastructure decisions that could affect local prices or availability. So let's pay attention to whether the Senate takes up the bill quickly and whether fuel retailers expand E15 availability before peak summer driving. highly possible, but plausible. Watch whether consumer prices show a real difference or only a political promise. If the Senate passes the bill, drivers may see more fuel choices, especially in markets with ethanol infrastructure. If implementation is uneven, the benefit may be regional rather than national. If compliance costs rise for refiners, some savings could be offset elsewhere in the fuel system. The practical question here is this: does this give drivers real relief or mostly create policy win for producers? How about you? Does E15 seem like a viable option for you in your future? If you live in a community where E15 would be an option, or you are in a farm or fuel producing community, please share your comments as to whether this story changes your life or what you see at the pump. The National Weather Service says scattered severe thunderstorms are possible across parts of the northern high plains this afternoon and evening. Severe wind gusts are the primary hazard. Gusty winds and low humidity will also create critical fire weather conditions across parts of the North Great Plains and the Great Basin today, and along with the southern high plains on Thursday. The goal here is to keep aware of all of the potentials. Severe wind can knock down trees, damage roofs, interrupt power, and make travel dangerous. Fire concerns might turn a small spark into a fast-moving emergency. So pay attention to the National Weather Service office as well as your local agency for any county-level instructions. We know what is confirmed is severe storms are possible through portions of the northern high plains. Wind gusts are the main storm hazard right now. That might fuel critical fire weather if a spark it lands, and it might create expected fires across parts of the northern Great Plains and Great Basin today. What is not yet confirmed, though, are storm tracks, damage reports, and fire starts or outages. Local warning statuses might change quickly, so pay attention. Viewers should not rely on national summary for neighborhood level decisions. So pay attention to these possibilities, listen to your local sources, and we want to make sure that you stay safe through these changing weather conditions. Watch wind speeds and fire restrictions. If fire weather conditions intensify, it would be a fast-moving incident. Be fully prepared. The practical question here is, are you ready for any changes that might happen in the weather? Please feel free to share your comments if you are in a safe place to do so. Well, that is today's Spectrum for Thursday, May 14th, 2026. The thread that's running through today's storyline is pressure. Pressure on prices, pressure at the pump, pressure in global trade, pressure inside public health agencies, pressure on medical privacy, pressure on courts, financial rules, fuel systems, and local emergency planning. And the question we keep asking is simple: who benefits from the decision? Who carries the cost? And who is missing from the coverage? If one of these stories touches your life directly, please share your experience in the comments, or subscribe and join and connect with me on the live conversation when we go live. Facts matter, but people are where the facts land. I'm Jared Urain. This is the